VoiceAmerica.com.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101 with host Susan Bartelstone. We're so happy you've joined us this weekend. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that'll help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's the host of Crime Prevention 101, Susan Bartelstone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Crime Prevention 101. And I have a very important show today for you. Now, when most people talk about the subject of domestic violence, the first thing that they say, why doesn't she just leave? Well, part of the answer to that is because it could require as many as 20 visits to county or state or judicial or medical or bunches of social service agencies, and especially if children are involved. It can involve countless lost hours from work if the victim is employed and often leading to her getting fired. And it also involves countless disheartening repetitions of her story to each new agency that she has to see in order to, quote, just leave. Now, back in 1989, a pioneering city attorney in San Diego came up with the idea to house all the agencies and social services that were relevant to domestic abuse cases in one place. And 10 years later, the first Family Justice Center came into existence, and it has proved to be one of the most significant initiatives to help domestic violence victims in the past 20 years. Yet, not a lot of people know that there may be a resource like this in their community. So, in an effort to draw attention to the fact that October is the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which it is, I'm going to be doing a series of programs on this subject. And I am thrilled today to have Casey Gwinn, who was that pioneering city attorney, the one who started it all, on my show today. Now, let me just give you an idea of who he is. First of all, he is now the president of the National Family Justice Center Alliance, and we're going to talk about that. He is the CEO of the YWCA of San Diego County. For 8 years, he was the city attorney in San Diego, and he founded the Child Abuse and Domestic Violence Unit there, and he led that unit for 10 years. And during that time, that unit was recognized as the model domestic violence prosecution unit in the nation. And this was by the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. And over the last 20 years, there has been a 90% drop in domestic violence homicides in San Diego. And it has the lowest domestic violence homicide rate of any major city, and that's been attributed to the work of this unit. As I mentioned previously, he was responsible for the first Family Justice Center, a process that took years to come to fruition, which he's going to tell us about. And in 2003, President Bush began a nationwide initiative to create family justice centers across the country and asked Casey Gwinn to provide the leadership for this. He's received too many awards for me to even begin to list. He's a prolific writer. He's the author of 2 books. Casey Gwinn, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to be with you.
And I know you're out there in San Francisco. You're at a conference. You're a little bit under the weather. I'm so thankful that you're going to be able to do the interview with me. Now, as I said earlier, the Family Justice Center has been called one of the most significant initiatives to help domestic violence victims in the past 20 years. So what is a Family Justice Center?
A Family Justice Center is really just the co-location of all of the services that are available in a community that a victim needs to be safe and to get the services she needs for herself and for her children. And that includes counseling for adults. It includes counseling for children. It often includes medical services. At its core, it includes community-based advocates and police and prosecutors. And then in lots of centers, we add other kinds of services, whether it's child support services or job training. The largest used service in family justice centers is civil legal services. The services that a victim needs to get a restraining order, to pursue legal protection in the civil justice system. So there's lots of possibilities for what to co-locate. The question is always, who is in a community that is willing to bring staff to one place so that victims don't have to go from place to place to get the help they need? Who's willing to have all those services come together in one place? And those are the people we try to pull together in a community to create a family justice center.
Yeah, and this was a radical idea back in 1989 when you first proposed this. A person could actually have to go to 20 or more different places, correct, in order to get the services she needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just essential to have it all in one place. And you would have thought it would have been so simple. And I understand it took you 10 years or more, correct, to get this put into place.
Even longer, actually. We actually first proposed the idea, Ashley Walker, who was then the director of the YWCA of San Diego County, and I, in 1989. When we saw agencies beginning to add more and more services, we saw federal funding coming, we realized that over time, as the society started spending more attention on domestic violence and family violence, we were going to have more services and therefore more places for victims to go. So from our first proposal in 1989, it actually took us 10 years to get the formal planning process started, which started in late 1998. And then it took us another 4 years to actually open the first center in the country. And the stunning thing about all of it is when we distill it all down, this is a very, very simple idea, that agencies should come together and have staff in one place so that victims and their children can come one place to get what they need. It's about as simple an idea as you could possibly have in this work, and yet it is very difficult and complex to implement. Agencies don't want to work together. They don't want to live together. When they do try to come together, very often it's like a principle of physics. You know, everything tends to go from order to disorder. And even if you put them in a building together, they tend to silo back into their own cultures, back into their own policies and procedures, back into their own kind of work cultures. So it's very difficult to implement this very simple concept.
Indeed, and I think that we're going to be talking about the National Family Justice Center Alliance, which I think you formed to help address that. But let me just ask you, how many family justice centers are there now in the United States?
The movement is going so fast, quite frankly, it's almost difficult for us to keep up with, even though we're providing a lot of national technical assistance and even international assistance. We believe that we have between 35 and 40 family justice centers open. We know for certain there are 33 open. We actually believe there are more communities that have begun going down this road that haven't actually reached out to us. They've either read one of the books that Gail Strack and I have written, or they've come to one of our conferences and they've gone back to their community and said, we can do this. We have the relationships. We have people that care. We can bring everybody together, but we haven't been in that loop. So we think we're between 35 and 40. We've identified almost 35 additional communities that are in some form of planning. We're anticipating that within 5 years we'll have at least 100 family justice centers just in the United States, not to mention what we're seeing happen overseas.
Amazing. Amazing. And you have 3 international centers, or are there more?
There are actually more sites that we're finding out about, but we have 3 kind of main sites, which includes Mexico, Canada, and Great Britain. Though we have a lot going on in New Zealand and Australia, and we're about to open a site in Amman, Jordan, which will be our first site in the Middle East, working with the State Department and a great organization called Vital Voices Global Partnership. So it's moving very rapidly.
That's amazing. That is just amazing. All right, now, I think that we're coming up on a break, Casey, so let's just hold that thought, and we'll talk more when we come back from our break.
News, opinion,
Can you hear me?
your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart would stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today. Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back, everyone. And yes, this is indeed Crime Prevention 101. And I'm here talking with Casey Gwinn from the National Family Justice Center Alliance. And we're talking about this amazing initiative for helping the victims of domestic violence actually try to leave the situation. And we talked a little bit about some of the services and activities. And I know you mentioned that there's medical services can be involved and legal services. I understand you can also have some unusual services like child protective workers. And what would be some of the services that people wouldn't necessarily think you would find there?
Yeah, it's a very diverse mix depending on the community. I mean, we've had dental services on site. We've had locksmith services where if someone gets a restraining order at a family justice center, they need to have somebody come out with them and change their locks, and the locksmith
I love that idea.
And engages with the advocate in the safety planning with the victim and then goes out with her, sometimes with a police escort, to do the lock change on the house. We certainly do a lot of work with children around art therapy and play therapy and support groups, but we also, in San Diego, started something called Camp Hope, which is one of the first camps in America totally focused on children who have witnessed domestic violence. And we have a piece of property outside of San Diego at a lake called Lake Sutherland, and we do wonderful things with kids out there that have come to the Family Justice Center. And Camp Hope is an integral part of the Family Justice Center because you've got to give children something to look forward to. If the best you're going to do with kids in a Family Justice Center is, hey, this is great, your dad's going to be investigated and prosecuted, your mom may end up with you in a shelter, and you get to go to a therapist, good luck. If that's all we do, we haven't done much to give children hope, to put joy in their lives, to give them something to look forward to give them something to laugh about. And so we chose camping and mentoring as core components of the Family Justice Center. And so it's a very diverse mix of things depending on the community. Tulane University just finished a survey of all the Family Justice Centers in America, and when you look at their range of services of what's being offered in centers across the country, it's really amazing to see that the sky's kind of the limit. It depends on how much a community can get together, who's willing to kind of, as Quincy Jones said when he got all the folks to film to tape We Are the World, he said, check your egos at the door. And I'll tell you, if everybody checks their ego at the door in this process of co-locating services, you can go a long ways down the road to creating a very powerful collaboration to help children and women and families.
That is an extremely important message, because I'm hoping that this show can get this show out to some of the service providers, that might be thinking about this in ways that they can really address this problem. And there's so many elements that you could actually put into a family justice center, like Camp Hope. Is this, by the way, are you doing this in conjunction with the YWCA? Because I know you have a connection with them now. Or is this something?
We really are now. It's very interesting. If you look at the history of co-located services in the domestic violence movement in America, domestic violence shelters and community-based programs led the way. Over 30 years ago in this country, when we started creating battered women's shelters, the idea first was just house them, just hide them, and then shelters began evolving, saying they need services. We've got to get services at the shelter. We've got to get services into our agency, civil legal services, health services. And they started going down that road, and shelters have been going down the road of co-located services for a good 25 years in America. But at a point, they stopped. At a point, they said, but we don't want police and prosecutors there. Very few shelters really co-located. There were a couple that had police and prosecutors on site, but very few went down that road. Very few said, but what about a school on site? What about camping? What about mentoring? What about the job training program? What about an e-learning center? What about a computer lab? Very few went that far down the road. And along comes the Family Justice Center that says, the central key issue to stopping batterers in America is not hiding battered women. The central key issue to stopping aggressors and offenders and abusers is police and prosecutors. The criminal justice system is where the law keeps its promise to women and children in this country. And if we don't stop abusers, we can just keep hiding the next generation of children and the next generation of women. And so the Family Justice Center challenged the movement to say, what are you doing to co-locate police and prosecutors? Why should victims have to go to you for this, this, and this, but then you send them off to the family court, off to the criminal court, off to the prosecutor's office, off to the police department? And that's where the Family Justice Center comes in and says, you know what, let's be grown-ups here in a community. Let's figure out how to model healthy relationships among agencies, and let's work it out. Let's all come together and try to create this kind of safe, special place where everything can happen in one place, kind of like those Verizon commercials where you see, the 1,000 people and the "Can you hear me now" guy, all in one place. How can we be the Verizon network for battered women and their children in this country?
And I'm going to actually ask you more about Verizon's connection, because I know the conference that you're at is the Verizon conference that they're sponsoring. They're very active in this, in helping out with the domestic violence issue. But let me ask you first, now, if someone wanted to put a family justice center into their community, how are these things funded, and how would they get started?
It really depends on the community, how they get funded. Certainly there are federal funds available now to communities. Family Justice Centers have become a purpose area in the Federal Violence Against Women Act. In the amendments of 2005, with the support of Senator Biden and a very bipartisan coalition, with the support of the shelter movement and a lot of the domestic violence agencies, we put Family Justice Centers into the Violence Against Women Act. They're in the Grants to Encourage Arrest program in Title I. So communities that are interested in this need to sit down collaboratively to talk to their sheriff's department, their district attorneys or state's attorney's office, their police department, because the money does come through law enforcement funding in the Violence Against Women Act. But a lot of communities are doing this locally. A local community spends hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every time somebody's murdered in a domestic violence situation in America. So not only do we have the moral tragedy of this death and children losing their parents, and very often both their parents when one gets locked up and one is murdered, but then the community has to pay for it. We did a lethality study based on homicides in San Diego, looking at first the danger issues and then looking at the cost of homicides. And we found that one domestic violence murder in San Diego County cost us a little over $2.4 million. One murder to process through the system and then incarcerate the killer. You can do a lot for $2 million. If you can prevent that homicide, if you can shift your money from the back end of the system to the front end. So a lot of communities are doing this with local funding. They're reallocating local dollars, as San Diego did. We didn't have a dime of federal money when we opened the center, and San Diego's had a lot of financial challenges over the last 10 years. And yet this has been a priority to the mayor, to the police chief, to the district attorney, to the city council, to the board of supervisors, and they've shifted a lot of resources to not only do we now have 3 co-located centers, but our ultimate goal in our community is 5 to 8 co-located wraparound facilities, kind of regionalized throughout the county. And much of that money will be local money when we focus this as a priority in the local community.
Now, I'm here in New York, and I know we have 2 family justice centers here now. We have one that's been operating for a number of years in Brooklyn, and they just opened one in Queens.
Yeah,
so
New
there's
York
2 in...
Go ahead.
Right?
Yeah, New York
2 in my little local area here.
Yeah, New York is such an example. And in New York, in some communities, they're very much community-led, and you've got nonprofit organizations coordinating them. You've got shelters taking the lead. In New York, you have this powerful leadership from Mayor Bloomberg and from Yolanda Jimenez and the Office to Combat Domestic Violence in the mayor's office, and Chuck Hines, the DA in Brooklyn, who really stepped out and took a leadership role. And as you see that...
And he did that, by the way, we should tell people, because his family, his mother... was a victim. He's been tremendous in that issue.
That's right. In fact, the Brooklyn Center is named after Chuck Hines' mother in honor of her courage. And in New York, you see the power of a local government that says this matters. And Mayor Bloomberg definitely stood up and said this matters. And now that they're opening their second center in Queens and soon a third center with the goal of trying to be in as many boroughs as possible, you see the power of it. There's nobody in New York that's not saying this is a good idea. And it was very interesting. I've got to confess, I was a little skeptical about the Brooklyn Family Justice Center because it's located in the courthouse. And so folks have to go through metal detectors to get into the building. It's the same place where criminal defendants are going for services, and not the way most of our family justice centers operate. They're usually not in courthouses. They're not places where offenders or aggressors would even be welcome on site. But they couldn't afford space anywhere else in New York City. And so Chuck Hines allocated 30,000 square feet in the district attorney's office to carve it out to bring all these agencies together. And I've got to say, they have created a safe culture, a place where victims can come and be safe and get their services, and they're seeing very significant numbers of people coming forward for help there. So even there, because of the unique nature of New York City, this model can work, even though it looks a little different than other places around the country.
And I think that it's important for people out there listening who might be wondering how it can be done in their own communities. There's no one way. It can come from the grassroots level up, from the government level down, state, federal, and whatever. So that, I think that's a great message I want to really make sure people understand.
Yes. Now, if folks want to find out more about this, they need to go to FamilyJusticeCenter.org, which is our national website. It's not easy to do this. We've had communities call us, and some courageous person will say, I'm going to open a family justice center. And we say, well, what are your relationships among agencies? Well, the sheriff doesn't like the police chief, and the police chief doesn't like the shelter director, and nobody, really likes the folks that run the hospital in town, but we're going to do this. Well, you probably shouldn't hate each other and then get married. It doesn't usually work out well to not have a relationship. And when you suddenly move in together after you've despised each other for 10 years, things don't get better after you move in together. So it's an interesting journey to assess a community. We have a lot of technical assistance support that works with communities and figures out where do you stand now, what do you need to do to get ready to co-locate, who could co-locate if you did it, do you have the relationships, do you have specialized services in various disciplines that are willing to look at this model. Very often we'll come in from our Family Justice Center Alliance team and we'll do some kind of assessment over a period of days. Now that you have all these centers, you can go to FamilyJusticeCenter.org, see all the centers, and you can actually then go visit them. We have site visitors coming to family justice centers all over America. So if you're in New York City, you can schedule a tour of the center and see it and say, hey, we're looking at this in our community. How would this work? And once you see the center, it'll really help you kind of visualize, gee, what could we do in our community? How could this work for us? And that's really the beginning. The dreaming is definitely the first phase of this. And somebody to take the lead, or a group of people to really say, you know what, we're going to bind our lives together and figure out how to do this in our community.
Now, the National Family Justice Center Alliance, which is what you are now the head of, this is the place that they can go to to get this kind of technical assistance, correct?
That's correct. And if you go to
together.
FamilyJusticeCenter.org, you can see our whole world. You can see all the sites in the country. We now have a membership process that's free for supporters, for communities that are starting to plan centers, for communities that are about to open, for communities that are already opening. And we have a great team of folks, a very diverse team of law enforcement and advocates and prosecutors and shelter folks, people that have worked in the domestic violence field, working together, both a local team we have, and we very much now have a national team, a national faculty working on this together to really help communities figure this out.
And you provide web-based seminars, trainings, conferences, all the resources, right?
We have 2 webinars a month that anybody can sign up for on our website to get more information. We have an annual conference that next year in April of 2009 will be in Anaheim. We're featuring the Anaheim Family Justice Center at that conference. In 2010, we'll be in San Antonio, Texas, featuring the Bexar County Family Justice Center in San Antonio. We have a whole host of online e-learning courses that we're putting up here shortly. The first one will be out in about 45 days, built by, supported by the Verizon Foundation. And the goal will be to really create this online learning center that ultimately drives people toward learning collaborative meetings, learning exchanges where we come in and work with them in a local community. And then as they plan together, they can join together with other communities so that people are really learning from each other. Nobody can be an island in this work. We're now learning so much about how challenging this is and the mistakes that we made in San Diego and that others have made. And so other communities really need to learn from our journey in order to be successful.
This is fantastic. And you also help them with their funding options as well, correct?
We do. We do a lot of sustainability planning. We've helped set up a whole series of foundations or expanding existing nonprofits so that they can really have a strategic plan for how to do fundraising for these kinds of centers. And this is what funders want to fund. Nobody wants to keep throwing money at isolated agencies that don't have collaborative services. Everybody wants coordination. Everybody wants collaboration. We're more effective together. We're more powerful together than we are apart.
Yeah, this was the key piece, I think, and this is obviously, you're the perfect person to do this because you went through the whole entire process for 14 years, and then beyond that, getting the first center up, and then finding out what had to be done to keep it going. So I think this was a terrific step up for you to do. And how long is the National Family Justice Center Alliance in existence now?
We started doing our technical assistance work as a national alliance in 2004 when the President first created the President's Family Justice Center initiative. But just in the last 2 years have we really organized it into a full-blown national organization where today I'm here in San Francisco as we're recording this with national leaders from all the national domestic violence organizations, and together we're talking about kind of future direction to this movement in America.
Okay, great. Casey, hold that thought. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the Family Justice Center Institute with you.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our all-star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime, How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787.
That's it.
VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back again, everybody. And I'm talking here with Casey Gwinn, who is the head of the National Family Justice Center Alliance, talking about one of the most innovative initiatives for helping victims of domestic violence get services and things that they need in order to maybe leave the situation. And before the break, I asked Casey, I want to talk about the Family Justice Center Institute. Tell me a little about that.
Well, it's very exciting to see the commitment, of course, that the Verizon Foundation has made for the last 5+ years, and Verizon Communications and Verizon Wireless and the whole domestic violence world, both their Hopeline program and the strategic initiatives of the Verizon Foundation. Most recently, they've invested with our alliance in focusing on creating an institute that will really focus on technology initiatives to support battered women and their children, that will really focus on online learning opportunities for both staff in family justice centers and actually for survivors of family violence, and then an institute that will really drill down to how we are going to keep pulling people into this collaborative model. And in the journey of doing this with the Institute, we've put together a national advisory board made up of 9 leaders in the domestic violence movement, many running national organizations, whether it's connected to the National Network to End Domestic Violence, Sue Else, who leads that effort of all the state coalitions in America, or connected to Kim Wells, who runs the Corporate Alliance Against Domestic Violence, or a lot of thinkers in the academic world like Sarah Buell at the University of Texas in Austin. And we've pulled this advisory board together to really think about the soul of this movement. What are our guiding principles? What do we believe in when we talk about co-location? Because the Family Justice Center is not just a building. It's got to, at its core, be a philosophy about relationships and working together. So we've got an advisory board working with us, and we're very excited about it. We're just rolling out, obviously, our first online learning. We've started these learning exchanges at our international conferences that are part of the Institute. And the newest thing that we're working on with the Family Justice Center Institute are going to be these pilot projects. For example, we're starting a project called the Electronic Safety Deposit Box Project. Battered women so often are carrying around 50, 60, 100 pieces of paper in their diaper bag with their children in tow. They don't know what all they've got. They've been told to go all these places in the kind of categorical referral system we have in social services in America, and they're just it's so confusing in the middle of shock and trauma and terror. And as they come into family justice centers, we want to be able to PDF and scan all their documents, set them up with access to those documents in an internet password-protected approach so that their documents are organized for them. They can print them out from anywhere they are in the country, whether it's photographs, medical records, restraining order applications, documents they've received from the various care providers that they're working with. And we're going to figure out how that works for battered women and their children. We've been told in focus groups that they really need this and want it, but nobody's ever done it anywhere in the country. So that's one of many of these pilot projects we're working on with the Institute.
That's amazing. And again, seems like it's so simple, but no one ever, brought it up to mind. Now, this is called the, what was that called? The technology component?
It's called the Electronic Safety Deposit Box Project.
Okay, and I know you've got did we mention the learning collaborative model with the different training programs that you're going to be offering?
Yes,
that's
really
part
focusing on both doing online e-learning together and doing individual sharings where we bring teams together from each family justice center so they can really learn from each other. We've started monthly director calls, so all the directors in all the centers in the country now are getting on a call together and sharing and dialoguing. We're going to try to do the same thing with the social service providers in the centers, with the law enforcement folks in the centers, with the civil legal service providers in the centers. Working right now with Sanctuary, the largest provider of civil legal services for immigrants in New York City, in their application to try to have a national conference on immigration legal services, including how you do those services in family justice centers. So really trying to create affinity groups so that the teams in these centers are learning from each other as we go forward.
Now, if you're going to be doing anything that you would feel would be helpful to get some publicity for a broadcast, I would love to put you on Crime Prevention 101 and just be there at the proceedings. Get some information out to other people that may not be there physically in that room with you. Maybe there's some way we can talk about that at some point in time and let Crime Prevention 101 be more helpful to you in what you're trying to do, because I am 100%. I am a crime prevention specialist. I've dealt with domestic violence victims for years and years and years, and if there's some way I can help out, put me down on the list.
Well, that's great, Susan. I think the next big phase in this movement is figuring out how to bring together housing, job training, and child care with the Family Justice Center co-located service model. We've learned so much from the shelter movement over the years about multidisciplinary services, co-located services in a shelter-based model, but most battered women don't go to shelters. The vast majority of abused women, and men for that matter, in America, don't go to shelters. And so we're now looking at this. The reason I'm at the YWCA in San Diego, California, is because we run the largest emergency shelter, and we have transitional housing programs, and we're trying to merge the case management and housing model of the YWCA with the service delivery of the Family Justice Center. Because really this whole concept of campus or village or community is so powerful. And too often, for the last 20 years in this country, whether a victim of domestic violence has come in through a law enforcement agency into the system or has come in through a community-based agency, all we're doing is triage. We're doing crisis intervention. And we're not creating communities where families exposed to trauma and abuse can belong. And I mean belong after the crisis. I mean belong 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. The myth in America is that if you are in a chronic abusive situation, all you've got to do is leave and you'll be safe, which of course is not true. But if you leave and we get you your restraining order and you get your counseling and you spend 30 days in a shelter, then the myth is that everything's fine after that. And life is so much more complicated than that, whether it's the educational needs of a victim and her children, whether it's dealing with the parenting after trauma issues, whether it's dealing with brain development issues in children that have been witnessing domestic violence. We've got to wrap ourselves around these families long after the crisis, and we don't do a very good job of that in this country. So the next big discussion for me in that crime prevention category is how do we really create a wraparound community that we can say to a victim and her children, come, be with us. And if you only need to be here a week, great. A month, great. If you want to join this community and be part of what we have to offer to you and help you get a job and help you get affordable housing and affordable child care and be with us for 5 years, welcome. We are here for you to support the healing journey. And that's the next big focus, I think, for all of us. And
also, I think that the families of the survivor of this should be part of this too. The mothers and the sisters and the brothers and
absolutely. So much need for education. So much need for a rallying point for the family once they finally understand what has happened, what to do to help, what they need to do to now be part of the solution.
Exactly, and how to help the woman and her children. And by the way, we do say women. We know that it's not just women. we know that it's just the majority of the survivors of this are women or the victims of this, from whatever standpoint you're looking at.
That's right.
Right?
And we're serving men in almost every family justice center in America. Anywhere between 10 and 50% of the clients in family justice centers are men. So we're absolutely serving male victims of family violence,
10 to 15%,
and gay victims.
That's right. I want everyone to understand that, and that men have a little extra stigma of not wanting to admit that they're in this situation, and that so the center is there for all who need the help. Correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, one more thing that I wanted to ask you about, and that is the President Bush Family Justice Center initiative.
That's
you were
right.
part of this?
Yes. When this started, this was absolutely President Bush in 2004 saying, I love what you've done in San Diego. Let's see what it looks like in 15 other communities around the country. He then added a 16th, which is New Orleans, where a year ago we opened the New Orleans Family Justice Center, which is a fascinating project. The first 16 sites we did in the President's Initiative all had federal funding, very much bipartisan support, though, from Congress in that process. And then, as it evolved beyond the President's Initiative, definitely launched into a very bipartisan initiative, and now with sites all over the country. And the President's Initiative is really coming to an end, obviously. It was only 16 sites. It was a pilot project where we really wanted to say, what does it look like in New York City versus what does it look like in Sitka, Alaska, run by a tribe? What does it look like if you go to San Antonio, Texas, versus what does it look like if you go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Tampa, Florida? So very different models everywhere. We learned a lot. Now we're applying those principles to a much larger movement, and it's not going to be about any one public official or any one particular advocate. It's going to be about how we, as a country, start doing this co-located service model called the Family Justice Center.
Well, these centers that he initiated, they will be able to continue, though. Correct.
Yes, all those centers are up and running. They're all operating. Many of them have had to figure out how to adjust when the federal money goes away. How do you get in local dollars? But it should be so. We shouldn't all be looking to the federal government to pay for all of this. Local dollars are necessary in this. We're spending the money already in our local communities. We're just spending it on the back end to lock people up instead of spending it on the front end to prevent family violence.
Okay, Casey, hold that thought. We're coming up for one more break, and then we're going to go into our close. Stay tuned, everybody.
Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today.
News, opinion. Your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back, of course, everybody. And we're talking with Casey Gwinn from the National Family Justice Center Alliance. And Casey, we're coming to the close of the show, so I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the lessons you've learned and accountability issues. Any final comments for me?
Absolutely. Gail Strack and I have now authored 2 books. The first was called Hope for Hurting Families, How to Create Family Justice Centers Across America, and the second is really a how-to book. Both of those are on our website, familyjusticecenter.org. And in those books, we've really documented the philosophy of these centers and outcomes we're already beginning to see. We've done over 5,000 focus groups with clients who have come through the San Diego Center. We have an outcomes study now in Nampa, Idaho. We have outcomes coming out of New York and Alameda County and Oakland, California. And what we're seeing is clients are saying this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I can't imagine why you didn't do this a long time ago. What took you so long? For years, I had to go from place to place, and now you've got it in one place, and I feel empowered, and I feel safer, and I feel like I have more hope. So the outcomes we're seeing both anecdotally and in large numbers in exit surveys and focus groups, the feedback from clients and the professionals is just amazing. But the other thing that's important in this is if you don't create processes in these centers to have accountability to clients, have accountability to survivors, to keep listening to the shelter movement and to those who have experienced trauma, you become a bureaucracy. And we don't want the Family Justice Center movement to create bureaucracies. We want to have these living organisms, these local community collaboratives that keep growing and adapting and changing, always staying accountable to those that we serve. And that's the most exciting part of it. It's the hardest thing to do, but the most exciting part of it. And at the core of all of this, if we don't continue to remember the experience of victims of domestic violence, women, men, children, and what they're going through and why they can't go from place to place, and what happens if you don't have these centers in your community. Twice a week in San Diego, I visit a woman in a vegetative state whose name is Rose Garver, and Rose was shot by her ex-husband in Las Vegas, Nevada, in March, and he killed another coworker of hers. And Rose is now fighting for her life, and I go visit her quite regularly to remind myself what this is all about. She's an amazing woman. We're praying for her recovery. But you know what? She needed a family justice center in Las Vegas, Nevada, and she didn't have one. And we've got to keep reminding ourselves we're not done yet in this work. Awareness is better. More programs are out there. More services are available, but we're still not done. We've got a long ways to go, and the best way we're going to do it is to stick together. And that's the call of the Family Justice Center movement to individuals, to agencies, to say, what can you do next to change the world for families in your community? And this is certainly one powerful way to do it, by creating a Family Justice Center. So we're challenging communities, join us. Come with us in this movement. We will help you, and you can change the world for your families in this process.
Well, that's great, Casey. And it's even more important now because, it looks like we're heading into some hard times in the country. We know that when there's economic problems, violence tends to go up, crime tends to go up. We might see a heightening of these kind of situations, and we can't fall back now. We have to do more to address this, not do less. So it's encouraging. We've got to get the word out there because I know that money and funding is going to be tight, and this is just not one of the areas that we can skimp on. So I thank you so much for being with me today on the show. And again, as I said, if there's anything that you feel that's going on that Crime Prevention 101 should know about, please get back in touch with me, and we'll see what we can do about putting a spotlight on it for you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for voice. Thank you for giving us a voice in this vision. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I thank you also because I know you didn't feel so well today, and you did beautifully for me. So I'm so pleased. And now, for those of you out there that are listening today in the audience, please, I want you to understand that no absolutes exist in a crime scenario, and no advice can address every variable. You got to evaluate each situation individually and respond to it in the way you instinctively judge best. But it's my aim with this show to provide you with the information and the options that will help you make an instinctive assessment very quickly. And to all of you survivors out there, I always say this in every show, if you've already been a survivor of the kind of crimes that we're talking about today or any other crime or trauma, please understand that nothing that happened to you was your fault. Even if you think that you used bad judgment in a situation and left yourself vulnerable, that is never an excuse for a crime or for violence. Please call yourself a survivor, not a victim, and understand that with proper professional help, you can put what happened into perspective and get on with your life. For those of you that might be in domestic violence or battering situation, or who know somebody who've witnessed it, who've seen it, or whatever, here's one of the places, family justice centers, that you can get that kind of professional help so that you can get on with your life. I also want to tell you that if you've missed any past shows of Crime Prevention 101, you can just go to my host page on the Voice America website, and all past shows are archived there. You can also go directly to crimeprevention101.com, link that I've set up, and that will take you directly to my radio show host page. And on my website, dearsafetysolutions.com, I post show notes for every show. And for today's show, I'm going to have a link to the National Family Justice Center Alliance website, and that is www.familyjusticecenter.org. But you're going to be able to click onto it right from my website there. Make note that for those of you professionals in the field or interested parties, they're having a conference in 2009. You want to make sure that you take note of that. On their website also, you can sign up for their newsletter, that upcoming events and trainings and these webinars and so forth. They also, Casey Gwinn mentioned a couple of books that are there, Hope for Hurting Families, number 1, which is Creating Family Justice Centers Across America, how to start the process off, and also number 2, same title, about how to get it into your community, how to attend these webinars. There's great information there. They have that store. Don't forget also, if you're at my DearSafetySolutions.com website, there's a lot of safety tips there for you, and I'm going to put on there my safety plan tip sheet for those of you who might be in a situation where you'd have to get out of it very quickly, or if you know somebody. I'm going to have my safety plan tip sheet and resources there. As always, if you've got a question or a comment about today's show or any of my shows, if you have a safety concern that you'd like me to help you with, if you have a webmail or something that you'd like me to comment on, an email you received, just go to my Dear Safety Solutions website and post your questions or comments in the response box. It's on the left side of the homepage. You can also just email me at solutions@fightsafe.com and use the header, I'd like to get your help with the problem. That just so it doesn't get stuck in my spam filter. And I've got a lot of great shows coming up for you in the future. Coming weeks, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I've got some more programs for you on domestic violence. And I've got a great show, which I think is going to be very exciting. There's some people that cut hair salon operators, and they have formed a training association so that, because who sees people better than your hairdresser? And they're training their operatives to identify domestic violence and what to do about it. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking more about non-traditional methods of healing. I've got a great organization that helps people heal through creativity and the arts. And October is also Crime Prevention Awareness Month. And I've got a wonderful guest coming up, Todd Davis from the LifeLock Company. And he is going to talk about how to prevent identity theft. I am just so excited about this show. And as I always say, it would be a crime not to listen. So stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartelstone invites you to join us again next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. Have a great weekend and a safe weekend.